Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Shaw.
And Mrs. Willbrand.
Coming at you this time from school.
Hooray.
Feels good.
It feels so good.
Today we're going to be talking about World War I. Oops, it went forward. It wasn't supposed to.
What?
It wasn't supposed to go forward. There we go. Sorry. World War I today.
Silly.
I apologize. We're getting back to it. It's been a while since Unit 2, so.
It's a Wednesday.
Must be nice. All right, so we're going to get right to it. World War I, starting off with the causes of World War I. And you should know that this is Miss Willbrand's favorite thing to talk about in all of U.S. history. So she's going to have a lot to say. Let's get right to it.
I'm going to try not to say too much because we always go way over on time. So, World War I does not start overnight. Most wars don't start overnight. Things build, right? Just like arguments with your friends. They build over time, and then they just snowball very quickly. World wars are the same way. But you can remember the causes of World War I by remembering the main causes: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Now, some people throw in the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand as well, and change Maine to mania. You can do it either way. I drew this. For you!
Wow. That's lovely.
Isn't that
Did you see it?
Did you see it?
I don't know that you saw it. Also, I think it might be backwards on their screen.
You're welcome.
All right, so getting into cause one is militarism. Again, you see the word military almost. Again, it is the growth of military forces due to industrialization and the fear of other nations. Again, you need to think about all of the things we talked about with industrialization, and then imagine applying that to making weapons and vehicles of war and things like that. So now we're talking like submarines and things like that. Mm-hmm. They existed, but it wasn't really it wasn't efficient to make them because it took just too long to get the steel. But now with the Bessemer process, we can make them easier, stronger ships, things like that. Also, just with weapons in general, we have huge advances with machine guns and things like that. Like since the Civil War and even the Spanish-American War, now we're getting into truly like an industrialized warfare. And since everybody now, like all these major countries, are gaining this technology at the same time, they're going to be really wary of each other. And so they're going to make sure, okay, I want to make sure I have these things to protect myself, just in case my neighbor over there, that idiot, just gets a little frisky with his new weapons.
For the first time in war history, you can now mass-produce uniforms, necessities, weapons, ammunition very quickly and ship it very quickly to the troops who need it. Also, militarism is driven by fear. It is a fear-based cause. So Mr. Shaw, his country, is starting to build their military. We're not friends. Why does he need such a big military? I'm going to panic, and I'm going to build up my military as well, just in case he's gearing up to attack me. I want to be ready. And so we see this happening all throughout Europe. When one country starts building up their military, other countries, who aren't great friends with them, panic and then do the same.
And it's not like you can hide it either. Like, no. It's like nowadays, I feel like it's a lot easier to like hide technology. Like when you talk about strength, we think maybe like missiles or nuclear weapons or things like that. Like those can be hidden. But like if you're talking about like amassing a big army, there's not really anywhere to put them. Nope. So that's another big thing. Like so now people are going to be able to tell really easily, what's going on.
Yeah. All right. Another one is alliances. So the A in Maine is alliances. And an alliance is just an agreement, right, to help each other. So Mr. Shaw and I are friends, right? So if Miss Womack comes and attacks me, Mr. Shaw's going to have my back and attack her. That's an alliance. Okay? We see alliances popping up all over Europe. We're going to talk more about this next. So here are the major alliances happening in Europe at the time. You'll notice that Italy switches sides. They're what we call a fair weather fan for my sport fans, right? They're going to switch sides after 1915 because they're on the losing side. I know, spoiler alert, sorry. And so they're going to jump to the winning side because they don't like to lose. But we'll talk about that at the end of the war. So here's just a list of your Central Powers and the Entente powers. Entente, by the way, means alliance. So it's an alliance. Good time.
Anyway. All right, so next one is imperialism. Again, so this is the I now. We've already talked about imperialism in class. This is just kind of, we've talked about it in the U.S. sense.
Yeah.
And what you need to know is that the United States was very late to the imperialism game. Really just with the idea that in like Spain, Great Britain, Portugal, all of these other countries had started creating empires and colonies, 14, I mean, we're talking about like well before in the 1400s.
We were an imperialistic colony.
Yeah, we were a colony. So like, and so that's the point is like we don't even start our imperialistic goals until what, 1860s maybe?
At least.
And so we are 400 years behind. So that's why we are kind of like focusing on our area, but these other countries like Germany, Great Britain, France, they had been very well established. And so you see all like in Africa especially, you talk about the British Empire, the French Empire, Germany has a little bit in there as well. And we know, and we've talked about how imperialism is the taking of colonies and the establishing of colonies around the world to exploit them for economic gain. Again, you can use them for military bases as well. Again, sometimes we think of it as like a noble pursuit to like help people out, but it's really, they were taken advantage of. And the competition here is going to be fierce because, again, there's only so much land, there's only so much territory that you can take. And then once conflict breaks out, all of these other colonies are going to be involved in the war as well. And it's really, that's why they call it a world war, but also this is just going to show you how bad these things are going to get. These colonies have nothing to do with these countries really besides, being ruled over by them. And now all of a sudden they're like, hey, you have to go fight in a war. Pretty terrible.
And we're going to use your land to build a base and keep an eye on our enemies. And you have to understand, guys, all of this is happening in Europe, which is a whole ocean away from us. And so we don't really feel a ton of pressure to build up our military at the time. We don't feel a ton of pressure to start land grabbing through imperialism. The alliances we have are really more based on economic trade than anything at the very beginning of World War I. So we don't play a huge role in any of this yet, which is another reason we're not panicking and running into Africa and trying to grab up land and going all over the world and building these colonies. So, nationalism. Nationalism is probably my favorite, Mr. Shaw. It is the pride in your country. It is the idea that your country is the best and other countries are not as good. For example, I am the best. Yeah?
No, false. Moving on.
So we see nationalism really coming into play here with the idea that my country is the best, yours isn't as good, which is great until you start looking at Europe in the sense that it is like one country controls a bunch of other smaller countries. And when you're like, well, Germany is the best and you're not as good, or Austria-Hungary is the best and you're not as good, then those smaller countries, even though they're controlled by that big country, are like, well, why can't I be as good? And why can't I be my own country? And so then we start seeing revolts. In the case of Serbia, which is not so good for Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Serbia, controlled by Austria-Hungary, sorry, I'm so tired. Now I'm all off. I'm so sorry. Controlled.
You're fine. You're doing
by
great.
Austria-Hungary. They start building their own nationalism. And they're like, well, why can't we be our own country? And then they start revolting against Austria.
So it's weird that you have this it's like double nationalism. You have a nationalism in general at like the large level, but these colonies that people have like within their empire, they also have pride in their country too. And so that's what you see happening in the empires like Austria-Hungary. They are, people are prideful in the empire, but they're also like there's certain parts of it like Serbia that are prideful in just Serbia. And so that's what leads to a lot of conflict. I feel like nationalism is really related to militarism in a lot of ways, really, and even imperialism. Like you talk about, seeing your military, like, they would have like military parades and things like that. And you're going to see those things and I could get that pride from seeing how great your country is. But that's also going to be encouraged at a national level. They want you to be proud of your country to the point that you are okay with showing other countries that you're better.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, when we talk about pride, it's, you can say patriotism is one thing, but nationalism is like patriotism on crack. Like you're taking it to the next level to where not only am I proud of my country, but I want to show other countries that I am better.
Yeah.
And you do that via conflict.
All right, so Archduke Franz Ferdinand is of the ruling family of Austria, and he's going to visit Serbia, because again, Austria controls and owns Serbia at the time, in 1914. During a parade, a member of the Black Hand, which is not necessarily related to the Serbian government at all, they're part of a revolting smaller group. They're going to assassinate the Archduke and his wife, but Serbia as a country is going to get blamed for it by Austria. Which is, again, not really Serbia's fault because it was a small revolutionary group that commits this crime. Austria is going to declare war on Serbia anyway in retaliation. This is going to cause a huge falling out across the whole continent of Europe. And I'm just going to go ahead and go to the next one so that you can see that. And I thought that, there is a video here for you to watch in case you wanted to watch how the assassination of the Archduke plays out. It's in the PowerPoint for you. But anyway, Austria declares war on Serbia. Other countries are like, hold on, Austria. Serbia is a teeny tiny baby nation that you're supposed to be protecting because you are their mama. You're their mama country. And you're not protecting them anymore. Now you're going to beat up on them. And they don't have the power or the strength to protect themselves. And so Russia's like, not fair. And they're going to declare war on Austria. Germany declares war on Russia and France because Germany and Austria are best friends. Okay, you see how the alliances are now factoring in. France declares war on Germany and Austria because they're like, well, what'd I do, right? Germany invades Belgium on its way to France. Belgium's a teeny tiny baby nation. Great Britain gets involved. And they're like, that's not cool. Also, France is our friend. And so then they're going to declare war on Germany, and it just falls like dominoes very quickly. It just unravels.
I just want to point out that it was my turn.
I'm sorry.
On this slide, and you took it. And I don't appreciate it.
I told you I love this.
Fun fact about this one is that the assassins, there was multiple attempts on Franz Ferdinand's life, and they failed. They kept failing. There was like 5 different attempts that same day, and everything failed. And then eventually, the guy that got him, Gavrilo Princip, he was upset that it had failed, so he went to go get a sandwich at a local deli. And the driver of Franz Ferdinand's car actually got lost, and it got kind of turned around, and he ended up turning around in an alley where Gavrilo Princip had just eaten a delicious sandwich, and Gavrilo Princip was able to just kill him right there in the car. So anyway, there was a number of things that had to happen, had to go wrong in order for Franz Ferdinand to actually die. There is other thing I wanted to talk about here with Russia and Serbia. So these are both called Slavic nations, and meaning that they basically both have descendancy from the Slavic nations of old. Basically, Russia and Serbia, they did not technically have like an alliance necessarily, but they felt like they were almost like relatives. And so when Serbia was declared war on, Russia declared war in support of Serbia. And that, again, I think that this graphic does a pretty good job of kind of showing you how everything just kind of, got out of hand. Again, like Germany had nothing to do with Bulgaria. But that was within the Austria-Hungary Empire, and then so on and so forth. Just everything goes crazy from there. Mm-hmm. Great job. All right, so getting into the actual war. Can I do this one? Is that cool? Okay, great.
Trench foot, not a fan.
Okay, anyway, so trench warfare, what you need to understand is that the war got off to a bang. People start, I hate you. The war got started off really quickly. People were, there was a lot of action right away, right at the beginning. And then, what you need to understand is that everybody was really evenly matched. Everybody had pretty much the exact same weaponry.
Building up their militaries all at the same time.
Yeah, they had been building up their military, for the last couple of years. You should know, though, that Germany was by far the most powerful. Like, Germany by themselves could have taken on every other country and probably won had the United States not gotten involved. We'll talk about that later, though. So anyway, what you realize is like these two sides, they go at it like literally we're talking about tactics that have been used for centuries. Like they line up all in a row, start marching towards each other and start shooting each other down.
Just like the movies.
Just like in the movies, but what they realize now is that they can't do this anymore because the weaponry is so much better. And you're talking about like if people march like in single file lines, you have one machine gun that can just take everybody down. So what do? They dig trenches. And so they had basically they fought to a stalemate, and then they dug trenches at that stalemate line. And then honestly, the war really didn't change from that much. Like it was just a mess.
A
like
little bit of gain, a little bit of loss.
Yeah.
A little bit of gain, a little bit of loss.
And the trenches took so long to dig. It's like any land you gained, you'd have to dig new trenches, things like that. So that's why it says stalemate was the main effect of trench warfare, and between the trenches was known as no man's land, and nobody wanted to go there. That's why they call it no man's land. Anyway, this is a barren expanse of just mud and dirt and nature in between these two trenches. Sometimes they would go over the top, but again, that was pretty much a suicide mission, so not very many people would do that. The one other thing, I'm so sorry. The movie Wonder Woman does a really good job, I thought, of showing the trenches in general, and she goes up into no man's land. Like you can't go up there. It's no man's land. And then she goes, "I am no man." It's pretty cool.
Too much. I was just going to mention geographically, this area that the trench warfare takes place in, a lot of France, it's very flat. So there's not really a lot of places to hide either. There aren't mountains or hills or forests or anything to hide in. And so you also dig trenches for protection because there's nothing in front of you to protect you. So,
and these trenches would be very like elaborate. They would have like, a latrine area where people would go to the bathroom. They'd have like a little barracks area where people would sleep. They were very, very involved.
Yeah.
There were some side effects though. Just so you know, it was disgusting. You should just really take a look at that picture on the bottom right. Trench foot. You know what I mean? Anyway, so it was really gross. There was lice. There's rats everywhere. Really gross water. Again, you don't have like any sort of plumbing to get out the like what people are peeing and pooping.
It rains a lot during this time of year, and you just dug a big hole in the ground, so it's going to fill with water a little bit.
And people are there for years. Like they're living in these trenches for years. So disease, again, trench foot. I don't know that I necessarily care that you have the definition of trench foot, to be honest with you. I'll just really burn that picture in your mind. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Again, that it's caused, like when you stay in water too long and your feet, your toes get a little wrinkly or your fingers get a little wrinkly.
You do that
Imagine
forever.
Doing that for a year, and then you would know what trench foot is like.
Your foot eventually starts to rot from not getting enough oxygen from the water and uncleanly. Okay.
And last thing is shell shock. Again, this is during this one we have a lot more like explosions, cannon fire. We have tanks all over the place, grenades. These things are going to basically, it's a lot more. I don't know, like invasive to your emotional state. And so shell shock is a term coined to describe the complete emotional collapse. So like if people were just walking around, we'd call it, post-traumatic stress disorder now. But like they would just be like basically, done. They wouldn't be able to do anything. They'd be unresponsive. Basically that's known as shell shock during World War I. Or, if you're a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, that's when you get knocked down, but you got to get back up. You have an extra life. Anyway, sorry, moving on.
He's full of it today. All right, so we're going to have some divided loyalties as well. Wilson is going to declare that the U.S. would remain neutral. We are not getting involved. This is not our fight. It's over in Europe. We're not a part of it. Most Americans do agree with Wilson because nobody wants to go to war. And so we start practicing isolationism, which is remaining out of foreign conflict and keeping to ourselves. Immigrants from around the world do divide loyalties. Americans feel sympathy for Great Britain. Again, we have a special relationship with Great Britain economically, plus they owned us once, so there's that. Wilson does remain neutral so that when peace does come, he can negotiate with both sides fairly. But that's not how it's going to play out.
Also think about, again, go back to immigration real quick. I know that we're running high on time, but
I'm trying to...
No, you're fine. Remember that immigration, we are, the quote unquote melting pot, salad bowl, whatever you want to call it. And like immigrants are from all over the place, are in the United States. And if we declare for one side, like we still have a lot of German immigrants. We have a lot of British immigrants, a lot of French immigrants. So if we declare for one side, we're going to have a whole section of the population that's not going to be necessarily happy with that. Again, the official position of neutrality and isolationist is there, but we still kind of help both sides, which is really not neutral. We had sold about 90% of goods to Great Britain and France and only about 10% to Germany, so you can kind of tell where our loyalties lie. And we did loan $2.3 billion to the Allies and $27 million to the Central Powers. But again, definitely favoring the Allies.
All right, so the war does eventually hit home. German U-boats are German submarines, and they are patrolling unrestricted waters outside of the borders of Great Britain and other surrounding countries. If any ship strays outside of protected waters, which isn't very far from British land, Germany has said we will attack these boats. The Lusitania is a British passenger ship, similar to the Titanic.
It was the sister ship of the Titanic. It was exactly the Titanic. It was exactly the Titanic.
See? And it also sinks.
Ugh.
German U-boats attack the Lusitania and sink it. It kills, again, it's a British ship, so we shouldn't necessarily get involved, but there are almost 1,200 people go down, and 128 of them are Americans. And so now you've attacked American people, and we're going to get involved. So Germany also sinks 3 other ships with Americans on board between 1915 and 1917.
Keep in mind the time, though. Again, this happened in 1915. We don't join until 1917. So again, this is a lot of time talked about as a big reason, but this is like they're going to use this as a reason, but again, it's not that the timeline doesn't match up. This is 2 years before we actually declare war. Also, so again, just like as Ms. Willbrand mentioned, in general, they're going to attack anybody stating that they could be helping the enemy, and that's what they said, that the Lusitania had weapons on it that were going to be going to the Allies. And we never really knew if that was true or not until like the 70s, and then they investigated the ship, and they did find actual armaments that were going to be going to the Allies. So Germany was actually probably validated to shoot that down. Again, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that their reason was valid, that what they had said. So the last thing that kind of happens is the 1917 is called the Zimmermann Note, and this is really like the most ridiculous thing you're ever going to hear about in U.S. history. Basically, Germany sent a telegram. There was a guy. It wasn't even Germany. It was their ambassador to Mexico. So the German ambassador to Mexico sent a telegram, a secret telegram, wasn't so secret, to the Mexican president, asking them to form an alliance against the United States. And basically it said that, hey, if you help us and we win, we'll help you to get back the territory that you lost about like maybe 30, probably closer to like 50 or 60 years ago, to the United States from before. Again, this is a ridiculous idea. Like, in Mexico didn't have a whole lot of power. Like, it's just... Anyway, it was stupid to send the letter.
Well, the goal is to distract the United States with a war here on our own home front so that we couldn't send as many troops overseas and help the Allies.
Correct. But even so, that's really just not, it's not really going to do what he wants it to do. But anyway, the British intercepted the note, and they gave it to the United States. Why would they give it to the United States, Miss Willbrand?
Because we're friends.
Well, I know we're friends, but what else do they need?
Oh, they need stuff.
They need
help.
They need help. They need some serious help.
Stuff in
By
all these
1917, they had been fighting now for 3 years, and it wasn't going very well. So, again, like I told you at the beginning, Germany was the most powerful nation militarily, and Great Britain needed some serious help. And that's why they gave them the note.
And we came a-running. In Russia, things aren't going so well in Russia either at the time. There are also revolutionaries in Russia led by Lenin. And they overthrow the Tsar, which is the leader, the monarchy in Russia, and they kill his family. And if you ever want to talk about whether or not they secretly survived, come see me sometime. It's a good story. And then they install a communist government in Russia. They sign a peace treaty with Germany. And at this point, the U.S. is like, oh, we're all in. And we come a-running and we join the war in April of 1917.
So basically, it was after Russia pulls out, like now it was just Great Britain and France alone against Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and that really wasn't going to go well because now it was it wasn't a divided front anymore, and they can just focus on beating Great Britain and France. Also, just in general, like the communism thing is really scary. Now we have a country that is actually using communism as their governing principle, kind of like the labor unions wanted in industrialization. Now they are actually going to do this, and we're going to see what happens. We're going to see what works out. But this is like the beginning of this like huge communist conspiracy and spread of communism throughout the world that's going to really affect U.S. foreign policy for the next like 100 years.
We didn't mention this earlier, but we need to. One of the reasons, because Germany was so powerful from the very beginning, one of the reasons they weren't successful in just crushing everybody at the very start was Russia's on this side, Germany's in the middle, and then Great Britain and the other allies are here. Germany was fighting on two fronts, and so they had to divide their military and their supplies. But when Russia pulls out of the war, then they're all in on just one side, and that's another reason the allies really need a lot of help.
And we keep talking about Germany, but just because it really was just Germany, like Austro-Hungarian,
big and bad.
Yeah, Austro-Hungarian Empire was fine, but like not near, like they didn't have the forces that Germany did. Basically, Germany was like looking for a fight here, and that's part of the reason why they get involved. Because
it goes back to like they had lost some land and like over the last couple hundred years, and
they were late to the imperialism party too, so like they felt like they were
feeling a little slighted,
definitely
by the world, and them being so powerful, and hopefully you know how World War I kind of ends. Like they fall pretty hard. Keep in mind that huge fall that they're going to have, because that's going to help build into World War II.
Hey guys, that's it. It's been a blast. See you next time.
Bye guys.